That was really nice of Rick Seaback to do that for us. Yeah, he's always he's a friend of the guy that puts these together for us, and I've always really enjoyed his landmark and his TV travel documentary shows. The landscape of Pittsburgh, it's peppered, right, with these blue National Historic Landmark signs. It seems like you can't go anywhere around town without seeing them. One of my favorites is found over in Oakland, right? With the score tied 9-9 in the bottom of the ninth inning in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series, Yankee pitcher Ralph Terry took the mound. And the first batter to face him was Bill Mazeroski, and believe it or not, with a count of 1 ball and no strikes, the Pirates' second baseman hit a historic shot over the left field wall, ending the game and crowning the Pirates the 1960 World Series champion. That day at historic Forbes Field, Bill Mazeroski became the first player to ever hit a game-ending home run in the 7th game of a World Series. Oakland's Ford Field, it was tore down in 1971, yet amazingly, 55-plus years later, the outfield wall in which Maz's home run actually sailed over remains in place, along with a plaque remembering this historic event. Maybe your dad, or grandfather, or someone has told you about it. That's for me and my family. It's my mom. She's the baseball fan. She remembers that day vividly. But the wonderful thing about this is, like, you can still go there and see it. You can go see and read the plaque and remember what happened there. It was an epic moment in Pittsburgh sports history, and obviously a marker moment in the life of Hall of Famer Bill Mazeroski. So let me ask you a question. What are some of your landmark or marker moments in life? What are some of those pivot point moments in your life? Right? Moments where you made a decision or something happened and it caused you to go a different direction. Moments that mark who you are. Moments that change the trajectory of your life. When you think of these moments, right, we always think about, like, what happened there for sure, but don't you also think of the place? Like, these important sort of landmark moments in your life. Don't you remember, like, where it happened? Well, what the place was like? Whether it was a building or a park, or you remember the place as well as the what. Hey, for me, when I was 16 or 17 years old, troubled teenager, I heard the gospel. We were given 20 minutes of silence to go outside of the meeting room and to sort of think about what we just heard and to have a conversation with God if we so desired. And sitting on a rock at a retreat center called Camp Crestfield, which is just up the road, I said, Jesus, if you're real, forgive me and change me, because I don't really like who I am, and I'm afraid of who I might become. And that was a landmark moment. Can still remember it. On a bench at Station Square, right down in Pittsburgh, about along the river, I asked Tina to marry me, and she said yes. It was a life-changing moment for me. Actually, Tina and I, we were recently walking around Station Square downtown, and sometimes when we're down there, we'll look for the bench or like an area. It's not sort of there anymore. There's some building and stuff now, but we know about the area where it actually happened 30 years or so ago. And this particular day when we were walking around there, and we saw this guy like lurking around the corner with like a video camera. And all of a sudden, this couple sort of comes walking down, and they sit down on a bench. And he, out of nowhere, pops down onto a knee. She's all shocked. He asks her to marry. The dude with the video camera comes like out and like films the whole thing. So now it's their landmark too, right? We share that landmark with them. In my late 20s, as a young businessman doing really well, I was invited to a meeting, and here's the landmark, in an old stuffy boardroom at the Homestead United Presbyterian Church. I was invited to be part of a discussion and a decision as to whether that church, my home church, where I was currently serving at, that's why they asked me to come in. I was volunteering there, Sunday school and kids ministry. They were going to hire for the first time ever a part-time youth director. And a man named Chuck Rosemeyer at that meeting stood up with passion and explained the position. And I can still remember the moment that I just sensed God telling me right there, that's you. I want you to apply for that job. That boardroom is a landmark moment for me. Changed the complete trajectory, not just of my career, but of my life. In a birthing suite at McGee Women's Hospital. I can remember it. Tina was in labor, and I was trying to keep from passing out because I don't do good in those situations. She gave birth to our little Alyssa, and the doctor offered me what looked like a pair of wire cutters and asked if I wanted to cut the cord. I choked back something and literally said these words, "I am absolutely positive you are more qualified than me." So Tina asked if she could, and she did it. And I still remember that crunching sound in my mind. I can't get it out. And then, Alyssa's like 5 seconds old, and he says, "Would you like to hold your daughter?" And I said, "Could you hose her off? Because there's like stuff on her, So it was not one of my best moments, I can say that, but it was a landmark moment. For us, there's something about Bethany Beach, Delaware. For years, we went on some family vacations there. For the last many years, Tina and I have gone back there to celebrate our anniversary each fall. There's a little restaurant there called the Cottage Cafe. It's a landmark because it's where we go like our first night when we arrive at Bethany Beach. And this particular fall, a couple weeks back, we were there. I couldn't wait because there was an extra special added landmark to this moment because the Steelers are playing the Redskins on Monday Night Football. And that's Redskin territory. And I couldn't wait to put my gear on and go to the Cottage Cafe and watch the game. And we sit down, right at the bar. We got a great seat right in front of the TV. We're about to order some food. And the people next to us say, "Aren't you a pastor at Northway?" And I'm like, there's no landmarks in which I can hide, right? So where are your landmarks? Those are a couple of mine. What do you remember that happened there? In the Old Testament, the word to remember, it's often the Hebrew word zakar. Right? In Exodus 20, here's an example, verse 8. "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy." That word remember is this Hebrew word zakar. In Ezekiel 16:60, God says this, "Yet I will remember," it's the word, "my covenant with you in the days of your youth, and I will establish for you an everlasting covenant." There's a prayer in Nehemiah chapter 13 where the word's used 4 times. In verse 31, it closes with, "Remember me, oh my God, for good." It's used often throughout the New Testament and the Old Testament in connection with worship. We are to remember and then worship God. There's a similar Greek word in the New Testament. It's atnamesin. It's found in Luke 22 among some other places. Verse 19, at the Last Supper, Jesus says, "This is my body, which is given for you. This do in," and that's the word, "anamesin," remembrance of me. Dozens and dozens of times this word is used, but here's the point. The word zakar and the word anamesin, it leads to or results in purposeful action. That's the key here. See, this word is not passive. It's not just to think about something. It demands an action from every follower of God. To remember or to zakar that rock at Camp Crestfield should cause me to act on the grace that God offered me at that really pivotal crossroads time in my life. I shouldn't just remember it, I'm to act on it. To remember that bench at Station Square, biblically then, should cause me to actively love my wife at a deeper level. That wasn't just a stuffy old boardroom at that church in Homestead. If I am to zakar that, then I'm going to have to realize that that's where I received a call from God. And anytime I doubt that call or anytime I'm struggling, it gives me the opportunity to go back there and remember and then lean in and live out that call. Bethany Beach, it's sacred ground for Tina and me. It's a place where we reflect on where we've been and where we're going. Biblical remembering of a landmark moment should cause an action to be pursued. And that's what this series is all about. So we're going to look at 5 landmarks, but this isn't about the place. This is about remembering something that happened in the place, and then what do we do with that? And for my landmark, I've chosen out of the book of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. I've chosen this landmark that it's a wedding that takes place in a little town called Cana. It says in Galilee. Scholars and experts aren't even sure exactly where that town is today. There's actually a church there that commemorates it, but they're not positive if that's even the location of this particular wedding, right? But what we do know is that Jesus grew up probably within 10 miles of where this story takes place. So I'm going to read this landmark story just straight on through, 11 verses. It'll be up on the screens if you've got your Bibles, John 2, 1 through 11. And then I'm going to come back and pull it apart. Some of you have probably heard this story. Listen for something new maybe. On the third day, it says there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. And when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no more wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding about 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it over to the master of the feast." So they took it, and when the master of the feast tasted the water, now it become wine, and did not know where it came from, although the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This, the first of his signs, so the very first miracle Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Jewish weddings, folks, were important and joyful occasions in the lives of the bride and groom and the family, but also the entire community would have joined in this celebration. A wedding celebration at this time, it was supposed to last 7 days, and it was the responsibility of the host or the groom or the groom's family to provide enough wine for the entire celebration. Cana being close to Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, and the fact that it's said that Jesus was on the guest list along with his mother, and the fact that his mother and there they had this conversation there. See, you can gather from that Jesus and or his mother most likely knew this couple. They could have been a relative. They might have been a very close friend. And this might explain why Mary feels responsible for the fact that the wine has run out, right? You know, I've spent a lot of time studying this scripture. Like, I think I read 7 commentaries and all kind of different things about. I dug into this language here. So track with me, because I know that at first sort of blush at looking at this, like running out of wine doesn't seem like that big of a deal. That Jesus would like do his first miracle. But see, I can assure you, to them it was. I can also tell you something. I've been to some weddings where I wish they would have ran out of wine, right? How about you? People can misbehave themselves at some Pittsburgh weddings, can't they? Man, you put an open bar, and some dysfunction among family and friends, it could turn into people behaving badly. Could you imagine a Pittsburgh wedding last 7 days? Man, whew, get in some trouble there. I do a lot of weddings, actually. I hardly ever go to the reception. One of the reasons I don't go is because the couple never knows where to seat me. Like who wants to sit with the pastor, right? Right? So I either get sit with their odd religious uncle, they put me with him, or the other thing they like to do is they put me with the person in their family that's the absolute furthest from God. They think that I can evangelize them after the chicken dance, right? Hey, Scott, they don't know the Lord. Okay, awesome. To have the wine run out at a Jewish wedding in this time, folks, it would have been more than just an oops, right? It would have been a major cause of shame and disgrace for this couple. Their marriage would have gotten off to the worst of starts. The family and friends, particularly in a small town like this, they had been planning and looking forward to this for a long time. And in my study, you got to sort of catch this. People in this region at this time rarely, and some commentaries would go as far as to say, never left their community. See, the couple would have gone on and lived their lives in this community and had this major embarrassment hanging over their heads and attached to who they were. You just got to grasp this. This isn't like inviting some folks over to your house to watch the Steeler game and not ordering enough pizza. This would have been a social disaster. And the text tells, though, that sometime in this wedding, they ran out of wine. Isn't there such an interesting exchange between Mary and Jesus at this wedding? Have you ever caught that? Did you pick up on it? Because Mary comes over to Jesus, it says, and just simply says, they have no more wine. I love this. I love it that they recorded this because it just seems so real to me. Because I absolutely feels like something my mom would do, right? Like my mom would hey Scott, I was talking to your brother and he says you guys haven't talked in a while. And like, period. She doesn't say anything else, just like leaves it at that. Like, okay? Last year at Thanksgiving, hey Scott, Tina just cooked this wonderful Thanksgiving meal and she's out in the kitchen now cleaning it up all by herself. So I should get up off the couch and go do something. Is that what you're saying, Mom? She just called me like last week and said, hey Scott, there's a little light on my dashboard of my car. It looks like a genie's lamp. I'm not sure what it is, but it just went on this morning. Okay, Mom, that's your oil light, I think. So what are you asking? So we gotta do something, right? But Mom she just identifies the problem. She's not offering any solutions. Just their observation, right? This is exactly what Mary does here, right? So can I tell you something? Maybe the next time there's a problem in your life that you're going to take to Jesus, you're going to take to God in prayer, maybe just tell him the problem and leave out the way that you think it should be solved. Instead of telling him the problem and telling him what you think he ought to do or what the proper resolution is, just tell him the problem and leave the resolution up to him because I think he knows best. And that's exactly what Mary did. Just told him the problem. See, but does Jesus' response seem a little cold or even maybe harsh to anyone else? What did he say? He said, woman. I would never say that to my mother. So, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. First of all, he calls her woman, and so I dug deep into that word there. And it's the actual Greek word gunai. And here, get this, it means absolutely no disrespect at all. It's actually an incredible, intimate, gentle, friendly, family-connected word. In John 19:26, Jesus is near death on a cross. He's about to take his last breath, and he says the same exact word to Mary, who's at the foot of the cross. In 26, it says, when Jesus saw his mother and his disciple whom he loved, John, there standing nearby, he said to his mother, woman, gunai, behold your son. One of Jesus' last acts was to make sure that his mother was taken care of, that John was going to watch after her. It's the same exact word. And then he says, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not come. Later in John 7, verse 30, Jesus is proclaiming who he is, and the Pharisees are beginning to circle. And it says, so they were seeking to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. Again, he was making these big, bold claims in the very next chapter about being the light of the world and about how the Father had sent him. And in John 8:20, he says this, these words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. At the closing of the Last Supper, just moments before Jesus would be betrayed and led to his death, in John 17:1, this is what's recorded. When Jesus had spoken these words, he lifted up his eyes to heaven and he said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that the Son may glorify you. The hour Jesus is referring to in this text, this wedding at Cana, is when he was going to fulfill what he came to do. And that was to die on a cross for the forgiveness of mankind's sin. And I'm not going to get into all the Greek language nuances of this text, but I just want to assure you of something, that between this simple exchange between Mary and Jesus there, it is not harsh. It is not cold. In fact, many commentaries, if you dig in some of these words, it's very lighthearted. It's very calm. They'll talk about how there's almost this understanding that's naturally happening between the two of them in this dialogue, like completing each other's sentences type of thing. There's a very familiarness to their conversation. Why? Well, because Mary knows who Jesus is and and what he's capable of doing, right? I mean, she was visited by an angel at his birth, before his birth. She gave birth as a virgin. to this little guy. Right? I mean, as a 12-year-old boy, she saw him teach with authority in the temple with a bunch of educated men and left them wondering, who in the world is this guy? She raised a sinless teenager. She knows that something's going on here. She constantly probably reflected on the fact that before he was born, an angel said he will be great. He will be called the Son of the Most High. Some commentators and scholars feel like a really good translation into our language today would be simply this. She walks up to him and says, they have no more wine. And he says, don't worry, friend. What's it to us? It's a small thing. It's easily fixed. And I think that sort of helps clear up what happens next, because did you catch it? She leaves that conversation with Jesus, goes over to those that were hired, the servants that were hired to serve the guest at the wedding, and she says, see that guy over there? Do whatever he tells you to do. And then Jesus immediately says to those guys, do you see those 6 20 or 30-gallon stone jars over there? Fill them up with water. And see, and I think sometimes we go right to verse 8. The water turned to wine, right? But like, can you catch this for a minute? Those guys didn't go out to the garage, haul the hose out, turn a spigot on, and fill up 6, that many gallons, 20 or 30 gallons of water. They would have had to have gone to a well somewhere nearby, hopefully, and haul about 120 to 150 gallons of water out of the well and then fill the jars. Jesus didn't miraculously fill the jars with water. He told the guys to go fill up these jars with water. Do you ever think at some point, like these servants, maybe a half an hour into this, would say like, hey bro, they're out of wine, not water. Like we got plenty of water here, okay? Your mother said wine. Did you pick up on the fact Jesus never touched the jars, right? He didn't put his finger in it and stir it up or anything. No. He just spoke his first miracle into being with 2 simple phrases. Fill the jars. And once they did, draw some out and take it over to the master of ceremonies. Mark Batterson's one of my favorite sort of authors and preachers down at National Community Church in D.C., and he says this of that exact moment, and I just love it. He says, the one who spoke life into all of creation spent the first part of his adult life as a carpenter. The furniture maker, the cabinet maker, on this day performs his first miracle and becomes the wine maker. The cabinet maker becomes the Cabernet maker. That wasn't Batterson, that was me. That's good. That was, come on, that was cute, right? It's really clever the way I pulled that together. And you got to get this, like he doesn't just make enough to get through the rest of the week. He made what would have amounted to about 750 bottles of wine. The master of the ceremony tasted, it says. He goes and gets the bridegroom, and like he had anything to do with it, right? He calls the bridegroom over. He said, most people, they put the good stuff out first and, save the lousy stuff for the end of the festival. But like, not you. This stuff is amazing. So Jesus, he didn't make no like Boxo wine stuff here. This is not a Thunderbird. He made some fine wine for these folks. Jesus' first miracle to set his hour in motion wasn't to raise someone from the dead or to heal a blind person or to calm a storm. It was simply to save a young couple some embarrassment. And folks, if you hear nothing else today, hear this. How much more does he want to do for you or for me? Maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, I bet that was probably a really special couple. That's why Jesus did it for them. They were probably like a wonderful couple kids. They probably met in middle school, dated appropriately, wore their silver ring thing to the honeymoon night, She was probably going to go off into the mission field, and he was going to grow up to be a pastor. So that's why Jesus did that for them. We don't know anything about them. But here's what I do know about them. They were busted up, sinful human beings just like you and me. And why did Jesus do it for them? Because he could. Because it's in his very nature, which is love, and it's joy, and it's grace. It's simply who he is, and he wants to do the same for you, because what matters to you matters to him. The wine ran out, and the first miracle came to be with two simple phrases. One, fill those jars. And my guess is there's some folks here today that you feel like you've run out. You're depleted, you're exhausted, you're beaten down, maybe you're facing some embarrassment. You've run out. Maybe you've made a mess of your finances. Maybe you've made a mess of your relationships. Maybe you're tired and wore down and you're running on empty. Can I just ask you something? Is it time, if that's you, if I describe something that hit you, is it time for you to stop trying to control everything and just let go? If you feel like that you have run out, there is an important question that I just want you to consider. Is it time you start acting like you believe Jesus is who he said he is? Is it time you start acting like you believe the promises of the one that you call your Lord and Savior? Because see, folks, I just got to tell you, man, I run into a lot of adult Christians at times that are acting like children. They're worried and they're whining and they're fussing and they're throwing temper tantrums. And I just got to say that they're just misbehaving. And the sad part is there's a world that's watching, and they're saying, if that's what a Christian looks like, if that's how much they trust their God, that results in them acting like that, then I'm not sure I want any of it. Because if you're empty right now, if you're run out, just ask yourself the question, do you believe he is who he said he is? Because I can tell you one thing, Mary did. Mary did. She just walked up to him and said, the problem, they got no more wine. See, he'll walk you through it. We just sang about it. He's never going to let you go. Why? Because he's good. He's good. If you're in that spot right now, I just encourage you need to re-encounter and be refilled with the Lord. Just ask him. He spoke two phrases that miracle though, right? Fill the jars, and then he said, draw some out. Because I just want to tell you, there's some folks here today that I'll try to explain this in a minute. This isn't all of us, but there's some people in this room. You're filled to the brim right now. And probably most of you are saying, no, I'm not. Like, I got this mess, I got this struggle, this is off the tracks, this is wrong, I'm worried about this. Because I think it's very hard for us to say, yeah, I'm in a pretty good spot. I'm in a pretty good spot right now. I just want to tell you that. I'm in a good spot. Really struggled hard with the passing of freedom. Oh my, God's been so good to me. I'm in a good spot. Don't put a but after that. But I got this. No, there's some of you, you're in a good spot. You're blessed right now. You're in a good season, right? You have some reserve. You have some fuel in the tank. You could be drawn from. You could be a blessing to someone. You frankly could be someone else's miracle right now. And I'll start big. There's some people in this room, you could foster a kid right now. You could. We have our Expo 16 coming up towards the end of this month. Our Option Orphan Care Ministry puts on all kind of ways, from mentoring to foster to adoption to just ways that you can get involved in your community, that you can love your neighbor. Some of you could be drawn from right now and could do that. You could serve at a food bank. You could drop a really big check in the basket right now. Because God's been good, right? You could take a mission trip. Maybe it's just simple as you could sign up to volunteer in that nursery. You could be drawn from. The servants at that wedding, folks, they hauled a lot of water out of that well. But of all the people there that day, they got to see the miracle because they were willing to serve, because they weren't run out, because they were able to be drawn from. The master of the ceremony, he gave credit to this fantastic wine to the bridegroom. Did you ever think about, like, what did the bridegroom say when the master of the ceremony said, like, dude, everybody else, they put the good stuff out first. You saved this incredible, fantastic stuff to the end. That's awesome. What did the bridegroom, what did he say? Like, yeah, I did. How about me? How about that? I'm a pretty fantastic guy. Folks, I wasn't responsible for making that decision to follow Jesus that day on that rock at Camp Crestfield. Jesus did all the work. I just said, I'm run out, and I need you. My wife and kids are amazing, but I can't be a husband and father without the strength that I receive from him. He's the miracle worker in my family. It's certainly not my awesomeness. I take absolutely no credit for the ministry that happens here at Northway. It's his miracle. He called this mess of a man from Munhall into ministry and led me here. I need to constantly zakar, to remember who is responsible. And there's times in my life where I just need to stop and remember his promises and be filled. When my tank's dry, I need to step aside, I need to get quiet, I need to reflect on his goodness and his promises and be filled. But there's times in my life where I need to understand that I've been blessed and I need to be a blessing. I need to be somebody else's miracle. Some folks in this room right now, you need to be filled, and some folks in this room right now, you're filled to the brim and you need to be drawn from. The first miracle, it foreshadows the last. Right? At a wedding in Cana, Jesus turns water into wine. At the Last Supper, Jesus raises a cup of wine. And he says, this is the blood of my covenant, which is poured out in the forgiveness of sins. If you're familiar at all with this ancient Jewish sacrificial system, there was no forgiveness of sins, right, without the shedding of blood. And what was required was an absolute perfect sacrifice. So God sent him who had no sin, Jesus, to be the sacrificial, perfect lamb, so that in him we might become, and this is so beautiful, when we believe and put our trust in him, the righteousness of God. At the Last Supper, Jesus' hour had come, and Jesus turned an ordinary glass of wine into a bottomless glass of grace. That Last Supper, he transformed wine into his agent of forgiveness. Grace washes our sin as white as snow. That's the greatest miracle of all. We can drink from the cup of blessing because he drank from the cup of wrath. The wedding at Cana, the story ends in verse 11. It says this, the first of his signs, so the first of his miracles, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee. He manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is very early in Jesus' ministry. So at this moment, the only disciples that he had called, he'd called Andrew and Peter and Philip and Nathanael and possibly one other, right? So for 4 or 5 disciples, this was their landmark moment, because it said the disciples left believing in him. They didn't know what the future held. They certainly didn't have it all figured out. They didn't know everything there was to know about Jesus, but they left believing. And I believe there are at least 4 or 5 of you here today that you know something is missing, right? You've run from Jesus, or you're sitting here right now and you are run out. And I just want to tell you, today can be your landmark moment. Because sitting on that rock at Camp Crestfield, I certainly didn't know what it was ahead. And I certainly didn't have Jesus all figured out. But I had run out. And by the grace of God, I decided to follow him. Best day of my life. Changed everything. And the same thing can happen to you right now. Right now. It's not a stuffy old boardroom in Homestead United Presbyterian Church. It's a sanctuary in Wexford on October 2nd, 1960. This could be your landmark moment.